October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We are showing an interview with a former pastor's wife. We've changed her name and her voice to protect her and her precious children. If after watching this video, you know of someone this might help or encourage, please feel free to share it. Thank you, my friend. Lisa, can you tell me just a little about you?
I grew up in a pastor's home in a very loving environment. But by the time I became an adult, I actually got married at a young age. And the man that I married, little did I realize, began to play a lot of mental games with me in the sense of verbal abuse and psychological abuse. And he would use scripture, which I loved the Word of God, and I wanted to live my life pleasing the Lord. So when my husband would read scripture to me, it was almost like, okay, I must be failing. I must not be doing this right. And so when he would read, wives, submit yourselves to your husbands, I misunderstood it that when he would play these mental games with me, that if I didn't submit to his authority as my husband, that I was doing something wrong in the eyes of God. And little did I know that that lack of understanding in my life led me to live the next 16 years in an abusive marriage that ended up almost costing me my life.
Wow. Lisa, did you ever feel that your life literally was in danger when you were in the moment?
Yes. At the beginning stages, the thing about that I learned about being in an abusive marriage is sometimes it doesn't happen right away. It happens subtly over time. And when it happens over time, the danger is that you don't realize until it can almost be too late what you're really, really living in. And the fact that I was a pastor's wife made it even more difficult because I couldn't reveal to people around me what I was dealing with. I really didn't know who to talk to whenever I had these issues that were consistent and constant. So by the time that I realized and that I was feeling completely unsafe in my marriage, it was 16 years in. And by that time frame, my life was in danger.
How did your pastor husband treat you in front of the congregants?
He treated me, for the most part, like I was his queen. He was very charming to people, and most of the time, he never wanted people to see this side of him. It was a side that he worked very hard to hide. And he could flip that switch extremely quick. He could go from being manic with me to all of a sudden somebody calls, he answers, and it's like he was completely normal.
So was he a narcissist?
Interestingly enough, he wasn't necessarily what I would consider a 100% narcissist. He had narcissistic tendencies, but he didn't necessarily fall in that category, 100%.
Would you say he had mental illness?
Yes. He struggled, narcissism can be a form, of a mental illness, but he had other forms of mental illness that were more prevalent than narcissism.
Did he ever make your children feel unsafe?
Yes. Over the course of the years with my 2 children, he created an environment that by the time they were old enough to begin to understand the environment that they were living in, they would hide themselves under the bed, or they would go silent when he would come home. They would be sure that they wouldn't be around when he would come home, because a lot of times when he would come home, he would go looking for them, and it wouldn't be a, "Hey Dad, how's your day?" Or that type of thing. It would be an environment of everything you didn't do right. It was a constant critical, constant negative yelling and being upset.
That had to be so hard. I mean, it's awful what he did to you, but as a wife, as a pastor's wife, and as a mother, I can only imagine how much harder it was seeing what he was doing to your precious children.
Absolutely. It was the hardest, probably one of the more difficult things as a mom, to try to protect them. Every decision that I made, the older that they became, was to protect them. Because if they made a mistake, they didn't do well on a test, but their father would find out, he would explode. It wasn't just a calm or even a corrective, but in kindness. It was an all-out battle. So I was constantly protecting them. If we went out somewhere and somebody was laughing too much, it was a constant on you to stop and to behave and stop acting like that. So I had to shield them in so many different ways, that it was extremely stressful and created a lot of anxiety.
Did you ever blame yourself for the abuse you received?
Interestingly enough, I carried a lot of guilt, and I couldn't figure out where that guilt came from. And I remember so many times asking the Lord, what am I doing wrong? And I never put it on the abuse that I was getting in my marriage. I never associated it with that. I just kept feeling like I'm not doing something right. There's something wrong inside of me, and I was always trying to find how to be free of that guilt.
Was your family aware of what was going on? Maybe your parents or siblings, or did anyone know what was going on before the divorce?
Before we were divorced, I actually, coming from my mom said that she was able to pinpoint specific times when we would all be together as a family. She was able to recognize the domineering state that he was. She didn't know how deep it was, and no one else in the family knew. They saw things, but it wasn't enough for any of them to take action. So for the most part, it went on quietly, and they had hoped that whatever they did see, that we would work it out.
How did you get the courage to leave?
Courage came to me when one particular morning I would be browbeaten, what I was told, 6 to 10 hours a day, locked up in a room. Sometimes it would go into the wee hours of the night. He wouldn't let me leave. He would scream and yell at me, curse, say all kinds of horrible, demeaning things to me. Like I would be in a fetal position and pleading to him to stop, and he wouldn't. And it finally came to a point, after dealing with that day in, day out, that one particular morning, by this point, this is into our 16th year of being married, I woke up every day with my hands shaking. And this one particular day I woke up and I said, I'm going to take the kids to school and I'm going to go to the park and I'm going to end my life. And I knew in that moment, thankfully, I had my love for the Lord, that I knew I could not be alone. So I called my friend and asked her if I could come over to her house because I didn't trust myself to be alone. And she absolutely said, please come over. So I went over to her house and I told her, if it's okay, I can't leave here until my kids come home from school, till I have to go get them, because I just would not be alone. When I got to her house, she asked me to sit at her computer, and I did, and she said, I want you to read this. And I was like, this is a domestic abuse website. What does this have to do with me? And even at this point, when I'm going through this every day, I still didn't fully realize that I was living in a domestic abusive relationship. So I looked at it and she goes, she said, I need you to read. So I read it. And when I read it, I realized that probably 90% of the questions I was able to answer yes to. When that realization came to me, it broke me and I fell apart crying. I was able to find a local counselor immediately because I knew at that point I needed help. And it was through that counselor and going to counseling that gave me the revelation of what I was living in. And through that is what gave me the courage to finally take a stand.
Would you say that your situation is rare in a pastor's home?
Actually, I haven't done the statistics on it, but my answer would be no. I actually believe it is more common than we realize. One of the things that stood out to me deeply when I went through my situation, when the word got out, across, to other churches and other pastors began to find out what was going on, what really actually shocked me at that time was there were 5 pastors' wives in the course of that year that my phone rang, and it was these women, and I actually never talked to any of them, verbally on the phone. They just left their message, for me to call them back, because I wasn't at a place to really, take their call and help them. But what stood out to me was those calls. One particular pastor's wife said and asked me if I could please call her back because she had a feeling, she said, I have a feeling that you know what I'm going through. And when I got that, it really made me realize I'm not the only one going through this, and there are so many more women in this world as pastors' wives that are facing this exact same thing.
I agree. Just last year, within a matter of a month or two, I had, I think, 5 or 6 pastors' wives, or one was a pastor's daughter, that shared their story with me. And it's just heartbreaking to think that there are pastors' wives that are living in fear of their own lives and in fear for their own children and under such oppression because of their pastor husbands. But who do they talk to? So, Lisa, what words of wisdom can you give to that pastor's wife or female pastor or lady that's watching and they're realizing, I think I'm living in domestic violence?
The first piece of advice that I would give them is to get counsel and make sure that the counsel is professional. And I don't mean to be rude when I say this, but make sure that it's outside of the church. It needs to be Christian counseling, but not going to a pastor to ask for counsel or another pastor. It needs to be a professional counselor that is trained and has a full knowledge of domestic abuse, and get help, because the thing that you need to do is it breaks you down in such a way that you become afraid of the very person that is creating the abuse in your life. And the first thing that you need to do is be able to gain the strength to take a stand. I also realize that some women may not be in that situation, that it could create an even more dangerous situation for them. And if that is you, then your counselor will be able to help you to just get out, if it is a life and death situation in that way. It was for me, but thankfully with the counsel that led me and gave me the strength to get out, and also ultimately it was the Lord that gave me that strength to help renew inside of me. The biggest thing is get help and get out. At that particular point, when you're going through that type of abuse, the most important thing is the safety of your life and the safety of your children. It's not a matter of saving the marriage at that point, it's a matter of keeping you and your children safe. If there's any hope for the marriage, that can be attended to down the road. And safety is the most important thing. And so that's what I want you to know. If this is you, if this is your story, get in a safe place and protect yourself and protect your children. And then if there's anything that can be done inside the marriage, it will be done over time. But the thing that I did learn is that in that particular time, it's not about marriage counseling. It's about individual counseling. It's about you getting help in your own life. And it's about your spouse, if they're willing, getting help for the issues that he's going through. And if he's not willing, then you have to get out.
You know, it's so sad. Some of the former pastors' wives that I spoke to, their husbands are still pastoring, or their ex-husbands are still pastoring today, because their churches just could not believe that their amazing pastor could be abusive. And I want to say to those women that are watching today, Lisa, that we believe you. We believe you. And get help. Please get help. So you don't seem to have bitterness. How have you said 16 years of living by being browbeaten and made to feel like you're nothing. And how have you come out of that and you don't sound bitter?
Jesus. My number one answer is the Lord. The thing that I realized once I got out of my marriage, I focused on getting really good godly counsel through a really good therapist for 2 years. And there's times, even since, that I've gone back into counseling, because when you've gone through abuse with a spouse, you're going to have triggers throughout the course of the years to come. And I still have triggers today, but thankfully they're not as intense as they once were. But the one thing that I learned from the very beginning was, if I didn't come to a place of learning to forgive my ex-husband for what he did to me and my children, then I am making the decision to carry that unforgiveness in my heart and life all my days. And it's those ingredients that create the environment of bitterness. And I was not going to give my ex-husband that kind of power in my life. So I had to walk through, and it's not like I could easily forgive him right away. It took a couple of years. But when the timing was right, I was able to forgive him in my heart with the Lord and what he did. And then I was able to move on. It doesn't mean that it's not been easy. It doesn't mean that it's been, something that sometimes might not stir up, but I would rather choose the joy of the Lord than to choose the pain of my past. God is the author of my story. I don't understand every single thing, why it had to happen the way it did. But what I do know is that God has been with me every single step of the way.
Thank you again, Lisa, for being real and vulnerable. I truly believe that your story is going to help many, many women who watch this video. And I trust that it will bring freedom to those that need a way to get out or to get help. So again, I thank you and appreciate your willingness to share. And just one other quick question. What are you doing with your life now?
Amazingly, I have remarried to what I call my God blessing. My children are doing wonderful. I've got a grandchild on the way, and I cannot wait. And I'm working and fully embracing, and I have to tell you, like, the doors that the Lord has opened up in my life with my job have been such an amazing experience to see the hand of God in my life and bringing a new sense of freedom that I never knew. And I got to say this, to remarry after abuse can be scary, but when it's a God thing, it's the most beautiful thing you can experience, because I can tell you, for the first time in my life, I really know what it is like to be truly loved by a man that really loves the Lord. And it has grown my love for Christ, because I can see Jesus in him. And it gives me a greater understanding in how the Lord loves us as his children.
Thank you for watching Silently Bleeding, Finding Hope for the Pastor's Wife. I look forward to connecting with you. Feel free to leave me comments down below and make sure and subscribe. If you want to know every time a new video is coming out, hit the bell. I would be so delighted if you would also hit the like button, and feel free to share this video with anyone you know that this would encourage. Blessings, my friend.